Have you ever wanted your children to have irrational fears of random smells? Have you ever wanted your child's genetic expression to change due to decisions you made? Introducing Epigenetics, heritable changes in a person's gene expression with no change to the DNA sequence. A study completed in 2013 by Brian Diaz and Kerry Resler proved that experiences can be passed on through generations. This was tested by presenting mice with a certain smell where they would then receive electric shocks. This eventually made the mice fear that particular smell. When those mice had children, the children were similarly afraid of the smell when compared to the offspring of mice that weren't shocked when presented with the smell. After being exposed enough, these mice's genetic expression had changed. The first and second generation mice's olfactory systems were tested, and it was found that the mice and mice's offspring that had been shocked had sprouted extra neurons in their noses and the smell processing center of their brain, so they could more easily detect the smell. This shows that traits passed along through epigenetics are not only instinctual and mental processes, but also physical changes that increase the survivability rate of a species, and hence that creature would evolve faster to adapt to dangerous situations it would come across. This in turn means that if a creature has survived through many dangerous and fear-inducing situations, it would gain the ability to better be able to survive and therefore would be able to pass on those traits. When it passes on its genetic material, the offspring would have traits that would assist that creature in surviving dangerous situations, and so it would have a greater chance of passing on its own genetic material to the next generation, leading to the prolonged existence of this species, making it a crucial part of genetics and hence life as we know it, allowing the great diversity of creatures that we see today.
Some background information about the DNA methylation is a chemical reaction in the body in which a small molecule called methyl groups get added to DNA, proteins, or other molecules. The addition of methyl groups can affect how some molecules act in the body. Everyone might be wondering why DNA methylation plays a vital role in epigenetics. DNA methylation regulates gene expression by recruiting proteins involved in gene repression or by inhibiting the binding of transcription factors to DNA. Technically, it plays a very important role in a number of key processes, including genomic imprinting, X chromosome inactivation, and suppression of repetitive element transcription and transportation, and etc. Okay, when does the DNA methylation happen? In unstable circumstances, epigenetic variation enables the generating of phenotypically varied descendants, increasing the likelihood of generating a phenotype that is closer to the ideal. Additionally, DNA methylation can be influenced by environmental factors such as diet, hormones, stress, drugs, or exposure to environmental chemicals, suggesting that environmental factors may contribute to adverse neurodevelopmental outcomes or relevance to ASD via effects on DNA methylation in the developing brain. The most common but challenging to diagnose hereditary mild bleeding disorder include type 1 von Willebrand disease, platelet function disorder, and mild to moderate clotting factor deficiencies. Clinically, these disorders are characterized by mucocutaneous bleeding. An organism can acquire new features because of genetic changes that change gene activity or protein function. A genetic variant is more likely to be passed down to the following generation if a trait is favorable and aids the individual in surviving and procreating.
Bored of your DNA? Why not alter its expression? With epigenetic inheritance, you can easily control what genes of yours and your future children are expressed. All you need to do is get traumatized. Epigenetics are the inheritance of traits due to non-genetic factors. These traits occur due to changes in DNA methylation, histone modifications, or non-coding RNA. These epigenetic changes can be triggered by a number of factors, including trauma. The epigenetic inheritance of trauma can occur when a parent is exposed to a traumatic event that forces the body to change its epigenetic expressions for survival. So say goodbye to traditional Mendelian genetics and hello to trauma-induced epigenetic expressions. If an organism goes through a traumatic event, it may link certain parts of the situation to the trauma. For instance, A mouse that hears a specific sound whenever it deals with a traumatic experience will start fearing that sound, even when the threat is not there. This is because the epigenetic expression has been enhanced in the gene that's responsible for hearing and processing sounds, which would be helpful for an organism to survive if the threat and the sound really are linked, as it would allow an organism to anticipate the traumatic event. This doesn't only affect the organism that suffered the trauma, but the epigenetic trait can also be inherited by the offspring and expressed whether the trauma is still present or not. Did your great-great-grandma experience a traumatic event? Well, those epigenetic changes could still be affecting you today. With epigenetic inheritance, you can blame your troubles on your ancestors. Thinking like a scientist, we reviewed, analysed, and evaluated many scientific articles as a group to properly understand epigenetic inheritance. This topic is heavily influenced by our genetics course, despite it not changing the genome. The very fact that epigenetics can be inherited is un-Mendelian. However, the basic genetics course lays the groundwork for epigenetics, because if you don't have DNA, you can't have epigenetic expressions of DNA. So next time you feel like your DNA is getting a little boring, just be thankful you don't have epigenetic intergenerational trauma.
Epigenetics shows that there's plenty of factors that go into gene expression other than just what's in your DNA, and we want you to know how you can use this to your advantage. You can increase the likelihood of survivability in your offspring, or in other words, just like give your kids insane superpowers, and making your own life just insanely stressful and horrible. Several studies have investigated how environmental stressors that are present in a parent's life can ultimately change the genetic expression of their children. They show that offspring of parents that were exposed to specific stressors will be more likely to show resistant traits in response to those stressors. Environmental stressors are anything that can influence reproductive success, physical development, safety, so that's stuff like predators, weather, food availability, disease, competition, etc. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can choose from, so you can really get creative here. One study examined the relationship between predator exposure of a parent to predator invasion of offspring. The study done by Storm et al. In 2010 took female crickets of reproductive age and exposed them in safe lab conditions to wolf spiders, the natural predators in the wild. These crickets have offsprings, and scientists compared their predator response to the predator response of offspring of crickets that had never been exposed to any spiders. They found that the offspring of the predator-exposed crickets survived much longer in encounters with the wolf spiders than the offspring of the ones that hadn't been exposed. They had better techniques of survival, like knowing when to stay still to not alert the spider of its presence, or when to make a run for it. The children of the unexposed ones didn't know what to do and got eaten sooner, but somehow the children of the exposed ones did. This is really weird to scientists, since crickets can't really tell their offspring cautionary tales about the big bad wolf spider, so we know that some kind of change has happened in their genetics inside of the crickets to improve their survivability traits, even though the DNA hasn't been changed. This is further confirmed by the fact that in another group of crickets in this study that were not exposed to living spiders themselves, but just the scent of them, the offspring of this group were much more behaviorally sensitive to the scent of wolf spiders than the offspring of the unexposed. So even when the mothers don't have actual life-threatening experience with predators, they can still pass off information to their offspring through their genetics. So if you're thinking about using these techniques to try and give your kids a better chance at life, you might not even need to get chased out by a tiger, you really just need to smell it. Anyways, we hope you learned something valuable about epigenetics in this presentation and how wonderful the world of genetic inheritance really is.